USC comes to Folsom Field for a Friday night football game. Should be an electric atmosphere. This is a program Colorado's never beaten, though. 0-13 against the Trojans all time.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? It's amazing that you've been in the same conference with a team for this many years at this point, and you've never beat them. But USC's always been so good. The Buffs obviously have not been very good for most of the time they've been in the Pac-12. So, but man, 0-13. That's an ugly mark. I know it's one the Buffs they want to change.
Yeah, USC's been 4-3 this year. We've seen some really good things out of them and some not so good things. Obviously, JT Daniels, their starting quarterback, goes down. Mm-hmm. He's replaced by a true freshman that has been pretty efficient, 75% completion percentage, and he's aided by one of the best receiving corps in the entire college football, with two guys that rank in the top 5 in the Pac-12 in receiving. Yeah,
and also an offensive line that always is deep and is one of the better in the country. But yeah, the receiving corps is really good. And, he even went down for a game or two, I think, Keaton Slovis. So they've had 3 starting quarterbacks this year, but still manage right now. I mean, they're in the driver's seat in the South Division. So they've managed to muster through all these things, and they're down to their 4th-string running back who got 100 yards and 2 touchdowns last week, so they're not hurting there. So, I mean, the USC is just one of those programs that guys go down like, all right, it's easy for them to say next man up because the next man is actually probably pretty good. A place like Colorado right now, next man up sometimes is like, well, let's see how this works out.
Is it, in often cases we've seen this year, is a true freshman that's
right, or it's a safety that was a quarterback for 3 years until just 2 months ago. So Colorado's next man up is a little bit different right now.
You mentioned the 4th-string running back that is now the first-string running back at USC. I think he ran a 10-2 or something crazy in high school, just a burner. What do you expect to see out of that offense against Colorado's defense, which obviously has given up not only more than 30 points every game this season, but 12 straight games Colorado has given up 30 or more points?
Yeah, I'm not expecting that streak to end this week. I think that USC extends that streak and gets into the 30s. I think if you're Colorado, you hope that doesn't get into the 40s like it has been the last 2 weeks. If you can keep it 35-31, then you hope that Colorado's offense can get back to where they were. I mean, the last 2 weeks obviously have not been very good. If they can get back to what they've been for most of the year, then they've got a shot to win this game.
We're not quite at Espinoza Island or D.D. Goodson out there against USC. But Tariq Luckett, again, saw his first action as a true freshman last week, is the backup at both cornerback spots now. It's scary thin there at cornerback.
It is, and they cannot afford any more injuries there. I don't know who's going to play corner. Mel Tucker did mention today that a coach had an interception the other day in practice, so I don't know if that's a possibility, if they can get a waiver there. They're scary thin at corner, and certainly you lose Aaron Maddox this week, and you're a little thinner at safety as well. But Trey Udofia is back on the depth chart, and he's a guy that we know has dealt with some personal things this year, has not played, but he did travel last week, and he's played corner. And Mel Tucker said that he's not really an option there, but if they get in a pinch, maybe he's a guy you can throw in there.
USC has a young defense, 9 freshmen or sophomores out there. They've dealt with some injuries on that side of the ball. They still, though, are 1 sack away from having the lead in the Pac-12, so they've been able to get after opposing quarterbacks. That's obviously a concern when you look at this matchup for Colorado's offense.
Yeah, although Colorado's offensive line has done a pretty good job of protecting Steven Montez, at least as far as sacks. I mean, he's obviously been under pressure a lot, but they haven't given up a ton of sacks, and so that's one thing you hope continues. This offensive line, aside from penalties, has been pretty solid. I mean, all 5 of them got a penalty last week against Washington State, so you want to reduce that. You can afford 1 or 2 here and there, but you don't want so many penalties from that offensive line. But they played pretty good with pass protection, and you just hope Steven handles things a lot better this week.
Yeah, Steven, as we talked about, had 10 touchdowns, 2 interceptions through 5 games, 0 touchdowns, 6 interceptions the last 2 games. He can bounce back. We've seen that in the past, but he's going to have to rally now if this team has any chance of going to a bowl game.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we both watched Steven throughout his whole career, and one thing that I've always liked about his game is the way he bounces back, and he's always had that one snap and clear mentality, and he never really has back-to-back bad games. Some fans might argue with that, but I don't feel like he's ever really had back-to-back bad games until now. And I was surprised when I went back and watched the broadcast of that game. I just didn't like the body language and just kind of the look in his eye. I felt for the first time in watching his career, I didn't see a confident guy, and I think that's a little scary for the Buffs right now because that's one thing that you could always kind of rely on. Steven's confidence was going to bounce back, and I didn't see that from him. And Mel Tucker addressed it during the Tuesday lunch, and he said, "I don't see there being a confidence issue." I saw it. He knows Steven a little bit better, so maybe there's not that issue, but they've got to have Steven bounce back.
Yeah, Oregon's defense is really good. The weather was horrible out in Washington State, but Steven has too much talent himself. He's got too much talent on offense around him for them to not be putting 30 points on the board every game. You look at this USC defense, their Achilles heel has been their run defense this year. They're second to last in the conference in rushing yards allowed. We've seen Colorado get better on the ground as the season's gone along. So I think that's the key for them. And you don't need to outsmart yourself. If you can get 5-6 yards every time on the ground, you stick with that.
Yeah, and if you've been doing that all drive, maybe you stick with it when you get down to the red zone. Just a thought. He also mentioned rushing touchdowns are huge for winning a football game, and they've got the guys that can do that. I mean, Mangum and Alex Fontenot have been pretty good the last few weeks. Deion Smith has gotten in there and done some good things as well. So you'd like to think that those two guys, at least Mangum and Fontenot, can have a good game this week.
You had faith in the Buffs last week. They proved you wrong, unfortunately for them.
I got half the score right.
Yeah, the other half was way off.
Right.
What are your thoughts this week? You know, you mentioned it after the game on Saturday when we looked ahead to this game that road teams on these Friday night games struggle sometimes. Do you see any glimmer of hope for this Buffs team?
I definitely think there's a glimmer of hope. I mean, I think a lot of it, for me, rests on how Steven bounces back. I'd like to see him be the guy that we have seen his whole career that bounces back from a bad performance. And if he does that, I think they've got a shot to win this game. But from what I've seen out of the last 2 weeks, I can't pick a win. Last week I went with it, but I can't do it this week. I'm going to go USC 35-27.
Okay. Yeah, again, there's too much talent on this offense for them to lay another egg on offense. Even though USC is extremely talented, they're young on that side of the ball. I know they played really well against Arizona last week, but I see Colorado's offense getting on track, scoring 31 points, but another game where USC's talent is just going to outshine this Buffs defense, and I see them scoring 38, so 38-31. In which case, you're starting to get in the mode where it's almost must-win with some of these games if this team wants to go to a bowl game.
Well, I think it's must-win now if you want to get to a bowl game, just because when you look at the schedule, there's only 5 games left. I think at Utah is a brutal task, and I think Washington here, this Husky team seems to get up for big games and not so much for games that don't seem so big. I think this is one when they come here that they might not be as interested in, and so maybe you get them. But I do think that the Buffs are sort of in must-win mode right now if they want to get to a bowl.
All right, Friday night at Folsom Field, national television. We'll be back with analysis after the game.